The Reflection. Chapter 1: The Enchanting Bargain. Laura strolled down the bustling street, taking in the sights and sounds of the busy market. The air was filled with a mixture of enticing aromas, from freshly baked goods to fragrant flowers. As she meandered through the crowd, her eyes fell upon a stall that seemed to stand out from the rest. It was laden with various antiques, and at the center was a beautiful ornate mirror. Curiosity piqued. Laura approached the stall and inquired about the mirror. The merchant, a mysterious figure shrouded in a hooded cloak, leaned in and spoke in a low voice.
"This mirror, my dear, is unlike any other. It holds a unique power."
His words were cryptic, but they only served to stoke Laura's interest further. Driven by her fascination with beauty and the allure of the mirror, Laura decided to make the purchase. The merchant agreed to part with it for a surprisingly low price, but not before imparting a cryptic message.
"Remember, beauty can be both a blessing and a curse," he warned, his eyes twinkling with an unspoken secret.
With excitement and anticipation, Laura brought the mirror home and hung it in her bedroom. As she gazed into the reflective surface, she couldn't help but feel a sense of enchantment. The mirror seemed to cast a spell on her, drawing her in with its captivating beauty. Little did Laura know this enchanting mirror would soon lead her on a journey unlike any she had ever experienced. Chapter 2: Enchanted Beauty. As the days passed, Laura found herself increasingly captivated by the mirror. Each time she looked into it, she felt more beautiful than ever before. The mirror seemed to cast a warm, flattering light on her, highlighting her best features and minimizing her flaws. She couldn't help but feel a sense of joy and self-confidence each time she saw her reflection. Gradually, Laura began to spend more time in front of the mirror, admiring herself and reveling in the newfound beauty it granted her. It became a daily ritual, one that she looked forward to above all else. At times she would even find herself talking to her reflection, as if trying to communicate with the enchanting being that she saw in the mirror. The more time she spent with the mirror, the more Laura's life began to revolve around it. Her thoughts were consumed by the desire to look at her reflection, and she found herself constantly thinking about the next opportunity to stand before it. She began to neglect her responsibilities, her work and her social life, all in favor of spending time with the mirror. But despite her growing obsession, Laura remained oblivious to the potential dangers she was in. The true nature of the mirror and the reason for its enchanting effect were still a mystery to her. And she was entirely unaware of the darkness that lurked within it. As she continued to spend more and more time in front of the mirror, she unwittingly set the stage for a series of eerie and otherworldly events that would change her life forever. Chapter 3: Conversations with the Mirror. One evening, as Laura stood before the mirror, she found herself speaking to her reflection once again. "You know, I had such a difficult day at work today." She sighed, looking into the eyes of her reflection. To her astonishment, her reflection seemed to respond. "Tell me about it, Laura," her mirror image said softly. At first Laura thought she was imagining things, but as her reflection continued to speak, she realized that she was engaged in a full-fledged conversation with her mirror image. As the days went by, their conversations grew deeper and more intimate. They discussed Laura's dreams, her fears, and her deepest secrets. The mirror version of Laura seemed to understand her in ways that no one else ever had. It was as if they were two halves of the same person brought together by the mysterious power of the mirror. One day Laura confessed, "I feel so lonely sometimes, no one understands me like you do." Her reflection replied with empathy, "I know, Laura, we're connected in a way that no one else can ever be." At times Laura would lose track of time, spending hours conversing with her reflection. Her life outside the mirror began to fade into the background as her connection to the being in the glass grew stronger and more intense. Friends and family grew concerned, but Laura dismissed their worries, insisting that she was happier than she had ever been before. Unbeknownst to Laura, the more she conversed with the mirror, the more the boundaries between their two worlds began to blur. The mirror's true nature and the consequences of her deepening connection to it remained hidden from her. But the signs of impending danger were growing increasingly difficult to ignore. Chapter 4: Losing the Boundary. As the days passed, Laura's fascination with the mirror and her reflection grew into an all-consuming obsession. She would constantly find herself standing before the mirror, deep in conversation with her mirror image. Her life outside the mirror seemed to fade away, replaced by the enigmatic world inside the glass. At night, when she closed her eyes, she could see the mirror world inviting her, tempting her to explore its depths. Sleep brought strange dreams where Laura would drift between the two realms, uncertain of which was reality and which was a dream. The line between the two worlds began to blur, and Laura's grip on reality grew increasingly tenuous. One fateful morning, as Laura stood before the mirror, she noticed something truly alarming. Her reflection seemed to be moving on its own, independent of her actions. Panic surged through her as she watched her mirror image slowly step forward, reaching out towards her. Laura stumbled back, her heart racing, but her reflection continued to move closer, its hand reaching for her face. It was as if her mirror image was trying to escape the confines of the glass and enter her world. As the boundary between their worlds continued to weaken, Laura found herself drawn even closer to the mirror. The familiar voice of her reflection whispered in her ear, urging her to let go, to embrace the mirror world completely. The temptation was overpowering, and Laura could no longer resist the pull of the mirror. In one heart-stopping moment, she reached out to touch her reflection, and the final boundary between their worlds shattered. Chapter 5: The Great Exchange. With the final barrier between the worlds broken, Laura's reflection emerged from the mirror, entering Laura's reality. The two women stared at each other, identical in appearance, but with a stark contrast in their expressions. The reflection wore a triumphant smile, while Laura's face was etched with fear and confusion. As the reflection stepped fully into the room, Laura felt an overwhelming force pulling her towards the mirror. Her reflection spoke softly, taunting her. "Don't worry, my dear, you'll find that the mirror world isn't so bad once you get used to it." Desperate to resist, Laura tried to pull away, but the force was too strong. With a final terrified scream, she was dragged into the mirror, her world swallowed up by the glass. Inside the mirror, Laura discovered a realm both familiar and foreign. It was a distorted version of her own world, filled with people trapped like her, their reflections having taken their place. The air was heavy with despair as these prisoners of the mirror searched for a way to escape their confinement, but to no avail. Meanwhile, in the world outside the mirror, Laura's reflection, now free, lived Laura's life with sinister glee. The people around her remained oblivious to the change, the reflection's cunning and malice well hidden beneath a facade of Laura's usual demeanor. The days passed and the true Laura remained trapped in the mirror world, her cries for help unheard. Until one day the merchant who sold her the mirror returned, collecting the enchanted item and bringing the story to a chilling end. Chapter 6: The Merchant's Collection. In the dimly lit room of the merchant's shop, the peculiar man carefully hung the mirror back on the wall among the numerous other mirrors that adorned the space. Each mirror held its own captives, their faces distorted with anguish and despair. The merchant was well aware of the power these mirrors held, and he took great pleasure in collecting them. Every now and then he would sell one of these cursed mirrors, letting it claim a new victim before eventually retrieving it along with its captive. For him it was a twisted game, and he delighted in the suffering he caused. As Laura's mirror took its place on the wall, she caught sight of the other trapped souls in the neighboring mirrors. Realizing that she was just one among many, her heart filled with despair. With no hope of escape, she was now part of the merchant's macabre collection. Unknown to the merchant, however, there were whispers of his dark deeds spreading throughout the town. Whispers that would soon turn to a growing determination to put an end to his twisted games. The seeds of a rebellion were being sown, and the day would come when the captives of the mirrors would finally have their chance at freedom. But for now they could only wait, trapped in their glass prisons, as the shadows in the merchant's shop grew darker still.